another very special episode. In this episode, once again sponsored by FMF Finest Premium Ceylon Tea, the tea that has sort of taken the whole country by storm. And we have a very well-known personality, very well-known business person, and a person behind the success of CFL brand or CFL group of companies. He's no other than the chairman of CFL Group, Mr. William Parkinson. William, a very special welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Satya. Good to be here.
How does it feel?
Oh, it's great.
Yeah.
Good. I'm looking forward to this, Satya.
Okay. There was a day when sort of you took my interview. Today I feel honored.
Well, that was a long time ago.
I know. The whole radio industry, of course, people know the success of CFL, the billion-dollar company. How does it feel to be the chairman of such a big company?
You did say billion. I don't think it's quite billion. But anyway, I wish it was. But no, it's...
I was looking at the, of course, Papua New Guinea investment.
Papua New Guinea, yeah.
Yes.
But it's a thrill, and it's been... I can't believe it's 40 years that it's coming up, the birthday, and so it seems to have gone very, very quickly.
There must be some people whispering within themselves, hey, that's William Parkinson, the guy behind the success of all the radio stations, CFL brands. How does it feel that time when people talk?
Well, I suppose so, and it's nice to be recognized every now and then, though I do try to keep a reasonably low profile. I feel that it's more important that people like yourself are the stars of the show. I'm very much in the background, and that's my role.
When you started this CFL initially, I would say probably the age, when I look at it, could have been 25, 20?
No, well, it was 23 really.
23?
Yeah.
At that young age, how did it come to your mind that I have a passion for starting a private radio station or something like that?
Well, I was fortunate, and I need to often remind people that I was born and bred in Fiji. My family has been here since the Second World War, really. So I grew up here. I did go away to boarding school in Australia, and I returned. And I was fortunate when I returned. I wanted to take some time off before I went to university to explore some things. I'd always had a thing about radio, and journalism, I think, was sort of I was attracted towards. And at the time I returned, Radio Fiji was going through an expansion program, and they had a lot of jobs on offer, and I started applying for jobs. I was very young when I came back. I finished school.
You did work for Radio Fiji, right?
Yeah, I was just barely 17 when I finished school, so I got this job at Radio Fiji, short story version of the story.
Okay.
Effectively, after applying for a lot of jobs, I got a job which was almost like an apprenticeship, really, where I got the chance to go around Radio Fiji trying out a whole lot of different jobs as a very young man. And that was a huge opportunity for me, and it was a great learning experience. And I got the radio bug, basically. That's where it started from.
Okay.
And in those days, there were a lot of really amazing radio people in those days, and I learned a lot from them. And we were all also talking about commercial radio and private radio, and where were the opportunities there. We knew it was emerging in New Zealand. Radio New Zealand had emerged, and of course well established in Australia and the United States. And so it was there, and we knew it was a thing. But we were trying to think about ways in which we could bring it to Fiji. And that was where those conversations first started when I was at Radio
Was
Fiji.
there any objection from mom? I mean, late mom, she had been very active with the nutrition things, and she was a well-known figure there.
Well, I think she was just relieved I had got a job. There was one stage when I did tell her I wanted to be a professional scuba diver. And she wasn't terribly keen on that idea. But I think she was relieved that I was in a job at Radio Fiji, which was interesting, and I was obviously passionate about it, and I met a lot of amazing people, and it was a real growing experience for me at that time.
Did you get inspired by someone, I mean, the person who sort of you looked upon? Because apparently there's always someone, like for me, whenever I talk about radio, I always tell that, okay, it was William who gave me the job. And because of his passion for radio, I felt that, okay, even today I love working. I love my radio job.
Yeah.
So for you, coming into this field, were you sort of inspired by someone?
Well, there are a lot of amazing radio people, a lot of amazing people at Radio Fiji at the time. So there were, and a lot who helped me and mentored me there. Some great radio personalities, but I think probably when I look back at that time at Radio Fiji, the person who mentored me the most and gave me was a guy called Colin Dioki.
Yeah.
I think you see him writing in the paper quite a bit nowadays. He's now living in Melbourne, and I remember him giving me a lot of support during that period. We also both got involved with the Marasing Columbus soccer team. So there was a whole community, we were all working together and we became very close friends.
You could have chosen another profession, but you still felt, I better go into this kind of...
Well, radio was, and the exciting thing about broadcasting was there's so many elements to it. And so that made it interesting for me. I was fascinated by the commercial side, obviously. I was also, I'm always interested in politics. I was fascinated by journalism. I spent a period of time in the newsroom under a number of great journalists there. And so there was a lot of learning across the thing. And of course, I'm also passionate about music. I was excited about that. So I used to run, have little radio shows that I used to do in those days.
All right, healthy people.
Scoop and pour. Scoop and pour.
Again now.
Scoop and pour. Stir it round and round.
That's right.
Round and round.
One more time.
Round and round.
Let's go.
Now hold it up. 1, 2, 3, and drink.
High in calcium with vitamins A and D, FMF Full Cream Milk Powder is a healthy, tasty, creamy milk flavor for all occasions. Open up a pack and enjoy the flavor of fresh milk instantly. FMF Full Cream Instant Milk Powder.
Ooh la la.
So this episode, of course, coming to you with the kind compliments of FMF Finest Premium Ceylon Tea. On your profession side, were you a good RJ or you could describe yourself?
I don't know. I don't know whether it was, because it was a different time.
Yes.
I do remember that of course, being young and being the sort of junior around the place, I used to get the jobs that nobody else wanted to do. I remember one of my first jobs was doing the children's program on a Sunday morning, which sometimes was a bit struggling after a Saturday night.
Okay.
And things like that.
You have to be nice to the kids out there.
Yeah, but and sometimes after a Saturday night that was difficult. But it was, I had a thing about jazz and that type of music. So I used to run a little Sunday evening show occasionally, which I enjoyed. I probably, if I went back and listened to the stuff now, I'd be embarrassed by it. But it was a lot of fun, and it gave me a lot of opportunities.
Yeah.
And as I said, that's where the bug
At
set
that
in.
age, you meant us to socialize. I mean, at that age, normally people go partying and all those things, clubbing.
Oh, there was plenty of that too. And I got to say, there was a lot of things happening at Radio Fiji. And as I said, that period before I went back to university 2 years later was I learned a lot. I did a lot, and it was a great. It was a fantastic experience. Yeah.
Putting a consortium to start off CFL brand, was it tough at that time?
Yeah, well,
or had people trust in you, or?
Well, I was very fortunate. I mean, when I came back from university, and we're now talking 82, 83, 84. And so I came back, and at that stage, the government, the Alliance government at the time, had said that they would allow private radio. And nobody had really done much about it. But I thought I was young and arrogant enough to think I could do something with this. But I was very fortunate that early on, as a young entrepreneur, a couple of important mentors for me came along. The first was a gentleman called Matt Wilson, who was a well-established journalist. He ran his own PR company, and he really took me under his wing and gave me guidance and support. And then we jointly put together the proposal to the government, and the government approved it. I'm giving the very short version of it, and we were away. But we realized immediately that we needed some investment, and we also needed some guidance and mentorship in terms of commercial, building of a commercial company. And the other very, very important person for me was Harry Punja, and he had thought about, he'd obviously shown interest in commercial radio himself. They'd put an application in and then withdrawn it. And so we went to see him, put our proposal to him, and remarkably he said yes to this really young guy. I think he probably had more trust in Matt than he had in me. And that built a really important relationship for me. And he was an important mentor. So I was lucky I had two very strong mentors. And I think that's critical for young people going into business. You need those older heads around you.
Yeah.
And they gave me a tremendous amount of support.
CFL turning 40th and 40 years of existence, 40 years of radio, changing times. From the day that you started and when you look at it today, the difference, how do you see that?
Well, the industry is so different. Personalities now are and the kind of work that we're doing now, and we're creating a video program which wouldn't have been conceivable early on. Obviously, we were purely radio. Now, with the rise of the internet and social media and all these other opportunities that come up, it's a very different world. It's a very exciting world.
Was it struggle on the day one when you started?
Oh, absolutely. Like any business, we were tiny. The FM 96 barely got to Pacific Harbour initially.
Yeah.
And it was a real job convincing the early advertisers to support us and survive. And that was really our focus, was how do we survive? We were fortunate that there were a number of early advertisers who came on board and gave us support. And it was, so that allowed us to get through those early days.
What was the turning point? I mean, when you looked at it, the struggle was there in the earlier part.
Well, I think two turning points. We in 1987, which of course was a critical year, two things happened. One, just prior to the military coups, we opened in the West, and I think that gave us little bit of boost and an increase. People took us a little bit more seriously. But then, of course, unfortunately, shortly after we opened in the West, in fact, we say that was one of the few official duties of the Bhavandra government was to open our transmission in the West before the coup.
Yeah.
And then the coup came along, and in many respects, the coup was it was immediately a real curse. I mean, it really put us under tremendous amount of pressure. But in the end, it was a bit of a blessing because a lot of people turned to us as an independent source of information. We broke the news of the coup. Radio Fiji came under a lot of political pressure at the time, and a lot of people turned to us as an independent source of news information. And I think also the Indo-Fijian community was seeking something different. And so then we got the opportunity to launch Radio Navtarang, which launched in 1989. And that was the turning point. Really, the launch of Radio Navtarang was very much the turning point for CFL. Once we started the Hindustani radio into that very important Hindustani radio market, we got going and we got everything started to move. We were able to get the advertisers, we were able to really get some traction, as we would say.
You have seen the two coups, which is 87 and then of course 2000. There was another sort of like a later part of 87 or 88, there was another thing happening. Then there the mutiny and all those things, ups and downs. And then of course so many hurricanes, so many sort of like tropical cyclones, floods. Was there any time you decided this is enough, I don't want to go further? Have you ever sort of like...
Well, you just listed all the things that went on in Fiji, of course. Everything happened in Papua New Guinea the last 30 years where we've been. And we did have a brief period in the Solomon Islands too, which was very adventurous. But I mean, so many things have happened. I suppose it's in my nature. I like a challenge. I'm fascinated by these kind of situations. There are times, I must admit, my part of my family is from New Zealand, and we are fortunate we have a little bit of a base there as well. And when I go back to New Zealand sometimes, and if I spend a little bit of time there, I'm thinking, this is really nice, but it's a bit boring, really.
True.
And so I suppose it comes from that. For us, these turbulent times in all these different countries, what I've learned is to always be cautious when you're dealing with these things. It's easy to panic but actually, like we did in 1987,
Yes.
And that was an important learning point. The coup in 87 presented us with an opportunity.
Okay.
And it was a huge opportunity. And the launch of Radio Navtarang was massive for us. And that was the big breakthrough. So we've learned as an organization to be very resilient, to learn how to ride through these difficult times, but also how to look for the opportunities in these difficult times.
Was there ever politics in your mind? To join politics or?
Oh, no, I don't. Well, I've always
You could have been a good politician, no doubt about it.
I've been fascinated by politics. I've always been interested in politics. But I don't think but then I look at them sitting in Parliament, I think I couldn't do that. I think I'm too restless to be able to sit in Parliament and listen to all those speeches. It would be difficult for me. And so, yeah, but I don't think I would have the political base here in Fiji to be able to be successful.
When I look at your routine, when I sort of like follow your sort of like work ethics and all those things, sometimes I just feel, okay, William could have been resting at home. How come he's seen around the CFL building or at least moving around? Is there something that's pulling you towards the radio station, or you just feel like I want to be there?
Well, I love coming and spend. Now I'm chairman and I'm not actively involved in the day-to-day, and my wife Sufi reminds me that I'm not actively involved in day-to-day on a regular basis. But I do enjoy coming around the station. I get a real thrill, particularly when I'm dealing with the younger generation that are coming through. I find it fascinating working with them and learning from them and seeing their perspective on the world. It's a real thrill.
And that reminds me of another question attached to it, that Gen Zs, the issues that's popping up, that they have a different way of working. How does it feel being with them?
Well, every generation is different,
Yeah.
And that's one thing I've learned over the years. And that's been one of the great things. CFL's always had because of the younger radio stations,
Yes.
We have some who never get old, but we have those but we've always got a new group of 17, 18-year-olds coming through the organization in some capacity. So it's always interesting to learn their perspective on things. And of course now their ability in terms of technology and how they use technology, and I'm fascinated by that. So that's something. My other passion is leadership training and development, and through Leadership Fiji, which we started coming up next year, our 25th anniversary for Leadership Fiji. So that is part of that. I think when I look back to the things that I get the biggest kick out of, it is about growing people. I really enjoy that. And that gives me much more satisfaction than making money as such. It's about growing people and growing organizations.
I don't want to use that word, white Gujarati, but you have been sort of branded as white Gujarati. What's your comment?
Proudly. Well, I think some of my friends, I think I can put it down to Suren Patel from Arabic Patels, who started that one. He made that. I think I'll put the blame on him. But early on, it was a huge privilege for me, obviously, to be working with Hari Punja, but also to be learning from many of our Gujarati clients. It
cannot be classified as mean, right?
No. I think it's wise and careful, and financially cautious.
Okay.
And no, that's probably not the right word. I think what I look at is, and I hammer home every day here at CFL when I'm talking to the team, our focus is on growing the organization and minimizing waste. So making sure that every dollar we spend, we get a return on investment. That's the key lesson that I've learned. And that when you're growing a business as an entrepreneur, it is hard work. And you cannot, it's always there. And you've always got to be taking responsibility. And it's really it's an everyday thing. So all of these kind of lessons I learned from working with and observing and having many friends in that community. And I think Fiji is blessed to have had the investment and the knowledge that has come from the Gujarati business community. And they've created an entrepreneurial class, which is really important here.
That allows me to give you some time to sip your tea. This is the,
Yeah, cheers.
of course, FMF
Good to see
finest.
FMF in the tea business now, yes.
You have two beautiful children, of course. Were they ever interested in the radio industry, or they wanted to be part of it, or was they sort of hesitant?
Well, I think they're interested. Unfortunately for them, I mean, they went to school away in Australia like I did, and then ultimately university. But growing up in Fiji, the time they grew up was through the period of when they were in primary school, when the 2000 events happened. We were living right next door to Parliament,
Yes.
so we were right in the front line of all the events of 2000. All of these kind of things, like for many children of that era, I think felt that they really felt uncomfortable about Fiji. They love Fiji, and they've chosen to live their lives one in New Zealand, one in Australia. They're still involved with the business. They still monitor the business as a family, and Farrar is in the event marketing business. Chavez is has a corporate position in Wellington. So yeah, they retain their
I
tribe.
worked with Chavez, and I felt very humbled because he was sort of like very sort of talkative, nicely to all the staff. His attitude towards everyone was so nice. But later on we heard that he had already gone overseas. That's okay, that's his choice. But looking at the empire that you have set up, a day will come, obviously he has to take over.
Well, no, not necessarily, because I mean the way we've structured Communications Fiji is a publicly listed company, and so we will look to the future now, and the kind of conversations we're having now about where do we go. Currently, our family company owns just a little over 50% of Communications Fiji Limited, but I think that one of my great goals, and I talk about growing people. One of my great goals is to grow people within the CFL organization and PNGFM, for that matter, to a point where I'm irrelevant. And actually, to be honest, that we've got to that point.
You seem to like doing gardening a lot.
Yes.
And then I've heard you have some sort of
we have bees in our garden. I'm famous for selling a bit of honey on the side. Yeah.
Somebody wrote to me, you know anyone who's selling pure honey? And I sort of immediately realized, okay, I know someone. That passion for gardening.
Well, I think it comes from that idea of growing things. I love to grow things. I love to build things. That's my passion. And so gardening is part of that. And I get great pleasure out of my garden and wandering around my garden and picking fruit. And I'm a regular supplier of bananas and fruits here in the CFL, along with the honey. And so it's all part of that. And that's coming from, I suppose, my grandfather was a farmer and connections to New Zealand. So there's a bit of farming in the background there.
Okay, and your likes, more like I'm talking about the food. Is there any specific food that you love? Or?
Well, my mother was a famous cook,
Right.
of course, and wrote recipes and was passionate about Fiji food. That was one of her things, along with being a nutritionist. She's passionate about encouraging the hotels and for us all to take pride in this amazing food that we have in this country.
Where did you get that passion of horse racing?
You can bring that up. Well, that comes from that, Javier. There's one
you
of
have
my.
2 horses?
Well, I have a small interest in a number of horses in Australia and New Zealand. That's one of my secret passions. Well, not really secret. I share it with a lot of people, and I love that. I think you get to a time in your life when you can indulge yourself occasionally. No, I think for me, the way I was brought up, giving back to the community is a really important part of that. I get a lot of pleasure out of that. We do a lot of that type of work as well. And of course, my work with Leadership Fiji, which takes up a lot of my time now. So all of these things are part of that notion and look, the other lesson I learned from my mother is, retirement. I hate the idea of retirement. Some people have this view of retirement. I'm just going to stop, And that's not for me. For me, I'm now into another phase of my life.
So what's next for William?
Well,
If I may ask.
we'll continue to grow and build and develop things, which is something that I'm focused on. I'm focused on growing and developing Communications Fiji Limited through people like yourself and Charles Taylor and the executive team here, and in PNG as well. But I'm enjoying doing it as the chairman, which means that I'm not actually doing it. I'm just offering guidance and motivation, and so that's a new experience for me. I've enjoyed understanding. One of the things I talk about within leadership is one of the key roles of being a great leader is to create the space so that others can lead in your space, and that's one of the things that I'm focusing on now. And similarly with Leadership Fiji, that's something that we're approaching. Nearly 600 people have been through the core leadership program over the last 24 years.
Exactly.
We've got members of cabinet, the judiciary, they've all been part of Leadership Fiji. So it's really exciting to see where that is going. And it's a bit like being in a garden and watching things grow and mature and flourish.
I love listening to you, especially when you have something, new plans that come in place, new ideas that can be sort of like worked on, and then new ventures that we always think about. But on my final note, have you ever thought, or did you ever think that these things can pop up on tea with the SN or chai with SN? SN will be asking me all sorts of these kinds of questions. Have you ever thought on that?
Well, I remember SN a long, long time ago. When you came up to FM 96 on 223 Stewart Street on a weekly basis,
I still tell that story to people.
Your job was as a telecom operator or something, I think in those days, yeah, for telecom, and you do the Sunday Hindustani music program show, and so I remember that. So I suppose when I think back to that SN, I don't think I could have imagined us doing a program like this, some nearly 40 years later.
Exactly.
So it's been quite a journey, and that's been the fascinating thing about it, is that changes around all the time, and how do you take advantage of it? How do you use it? How do you use it for the benefit of others?
I take it as a compliment. Thank you so much, William, for coming into this program especially. This is one of my sort of like program that I love doing, chatting with people, talking about the background, how they've come up, what are the things they are doing. And today, our viewers found out more about William Parkinson. It was a pleasure having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, SN. Thank you.